What's good, YouTube? Sam Webb back again with another Shopify video. Today I want to go back to the basics. So we're going to start a new series on how to build a Shopify theme from scratch. This series is meant to replace my old series, which was centered around Slate as a workflow tool. We'll be using a new workflow that I built called Workshop, and today I'm going to walk you through the steps of setting up a new theme and getting the workflow in place. So let's get started. I want to start off with a bit of an introduction to WorkshopCLI. So Workshop is a tool, it's a CLI tool that allows you to very quickly generate a new workflow. There are two workflows. There's Workshop Basic and Workshop Advanced Gulp. Workshop Basic is a workflow that basically the exact setup of Shopify, except it allows you to store your code in GitHub and then deploy it versus having to work directly in Shopify. So if you really want to get started quickly and you don't want any kind of advanced tools, then Workshop Basic would be what you would use. Workshop Advanced Gulp is the second workflow, and it's, as the name implies, a much more advanced workflow that allows for a much more customized feel. So it's going to have, you're going to be able to use import, export in JavaScript, and it's built for SaaS, and it allows for, within the snippets folder and the sections folder allows for subfolders and just some little nice to haves. And it's also a good starting point if you want to get a little bit more advanced and kind of add your own twist to your workflow if you have your own things you want to add to it. The theme that comes from this is completely blank, which is perfect for what I'm trying to do. And so let's take a look at WorkshopCLI page. This is the page that you would go to just to kind of get some documentation and see, what are the different commands that you can use. And we're going to get a little bit more into how you use these things, so I'm not going to cover the pages too much. And then Workshop Advanced Gulp is what we're going to be using today. And if you were to click in theme, this is the documentation on how the actual theme works. And then really quickly, this is the store that we're going to be working on. It's called Band Basic. It's a store that I very recently built, and I'm using the minimal theme right now just as a placeholder while I build this brand new theme, which is what we're going to do in this video series. So we're not going to look too much at the minimal theme because all this is temporary until we build up this new theme. So let's get started by getting WorkshopCLI installed. So head over to my terminal, and the first thing is I do like to use Yarn for everything, and this is built to be used with Yarn. To use Yarn, you can use npm if you want for your commands, but I just prefer Yarn. So to install this, we would do yarn global add WorkshopCLI. And so the at WorkshopCLI at first is the namespace, it's the organization, and then this after the slash is the actual CLI tool. So anything from Workshop, there will be new workflows that come out as well, and the workflows that are currently there will be updated. But you will always have to use at WorkshopCLI when installing these, because they're all going to be under that namespace. Enter. And for now, this is going to run really quickly. You're going to get a bunch of warnings for Babel, but you don't have to worry about those. So let's clear that out. And now we should have the WorkshopCLI installed. So I can type workshop help, and that's going to tell me currently the 3 commands that I have, and how you can use this help menu to learn a little bit more about these commands. So you can do workshop help and type in the command, and that's going to tell you it generates a new advanced scope workflow, and it has one option called name, so you can name your project whatever you want. By default, as you can see here, it'll be called Workshop Advanced Scope Workflow, but you probably want to name that whatever your theme's going to be called. So let's run that command. Workshop advanced gulp and -- name equals, let's call it band basic shop. Hit enter, and that's it. It's created. So if I hit ls, you'll see that band basic is there. So let's clear cd into band basic and ls, and you'll see we have a readme in here. We've got a gulp file, a package.json. If I ls attack A, just so I can get a better view of things like the dot files. See, we have a dot ignore as well in here in source and workflow and some other files. If I run code dot, I use VS Code. It's going to open this up in VS Code, and this is where we're going to start working from. So let me make that a little bigger. So really quickly, I want to go over kind of the structure of workflow. So we've got setup.config.yaml. This is something that carries over from ThemeKit, and if you've used ThemeKit, then you'll know what this file is. And it's set up the same way. You would have these when you're doing your development. You would have your API password and your theme ID and your store name. You replace those, and then dist is the directory that we're going to be deploying from when we do our yarn deploys and things like that. We've got the README, which I kind of showed you before, but it just goes over the commands and some of the talks about the structure. We've got package.json. The Gulp file is kind of the connector with Gulp and how some of these tasks run in the background. Git ignore, we don't really have to worry too much about that. And then we've got these two folders, workflow and source. So source is where you're going to be doing all of your Shopify work, all the building of themes and snippets and JavaScript and stuff that's going to show up on the front end. That's where you're going to do everything. So we've got a few different folders. We've got the images folder, which once compiled this is where you want to store your images, and once compiled, these images will move into assets in the dist folder. Liquid is set up exactly the same way as your Shopify store is, as your Shopify store's code base is, except it doesn't have an assets folder. The assets folder is built based on all the other folders outside of Liquid. So images, scripts, static, styles, and SVG. The things you save in there and the things you do in there all get built, and they all end up creating the assets folder. So back to Liquid, before we get into that, you've got all your normal folders. They all work the same except for sections and snippets. Sections and snippets allow for, right now I've got a test that shows up in there just so you can see how it works, but it's got this test.liquid file, and that's within a folder called test. So in Shopify, you can't normally have subfolders in snippets or sections, but I've added a little bit into the workflow to allow that, so we can have better structuring of our code and have better code organization. So that's Liquid. Scripts is going to be all of your JavaScript. So I mentioned earlier that you can use import export in the JavaScript, or I may not have mentioned that, but you can. And so if I open this, you see that we've got import example from components example, and inside of components we've got this little function here. And so this is going to be using the latest and greatest of JavaScript. Static is for you to have files that you don't want to be run through any sort of processing. These are files that won't be touched. They'll just directly be moved exactly how they are into assets. Styles is all CSS based, and so you've got your main entry point, which is theme.css, and then you can format the rest of your CSS however you want. And we've got this SVG folder, which when built will, so this is separate from images, right? So you've got images which you can upload SVGs to. They'll stay as SVGs and they'll be uploaded to assets as an SVG file. Or you can put an SVG into this SVG folder, and this is if you want to use the SVG if you want to use the HTML of the SVG instead of putting it in an image tag, you want to use it as HTML. And what this will do is it will convert this SVG file into a liquid file, and it'll put, I believe it's SVG -- on the beginning of it. We'll double check that and see exactly what it is, but that's what this folder does. And then you got workflow, which has a bunch of stuff in it. We've got this one, the only thing that I'm gonna go over here is this config file. And there's only one configuration in there at the moment for Shopify Plus. So if it's defaults to false, but if you change it to true, when you run your build, it will, if I go back to source, when you run your build, it will build this checkout file. It will build this checkout.js, and it will build this checkout.scss. And that's because you only have access to edit checkout.liquid in Shopify if you have a Shopify Plus storefront. And so for most stores, this will be turned off. But if you decide to go Shopify Plus, or if you're working on a client that has a Shopify Plus storefront, then you can toggle this on to be able to make changes to checkout.liquid. So that's the file structure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the terminal. And I use VS Code, and I'm able to type on a Mac, and I'm able to do Control-tilde, and that opens up the terminal within my editor. Close some of these. And I'm going to start by doing yarn so I can install all my dependencies. This doesn't take very long at all at the moment. If you start to add things in here, and if you continually grow the build, this will take more and more time as you add things. But at the moment, it's a fairly quick process. And there you go, it's done. And what you'll see is now we have this node modules folder, and that's got all of our modules in it. And I'm also gonna git init just so that I can see what folders are ignored. Node modules is ignored. And so the next thing we need to do is do a build, just so we can test that it works. So I'm gonna run yarn build, and this is gonna give us a chance to see the build folder as well. So that build is done, and it created this dist folder. And dist is set up to be an exact replica of Shopify. Right? This is what your code would look like if you were in Shopify. And so you'll see that we have assets, and like I mentioned earlier, theme.css was built and moved into here. Theme.js was built and moved into here, and you can see you've got example and it's calling itself. Next, I want to talk about, we want to get this on the site, right? So I want to talk about how you would get this set up, how you get a theme set up using this. So Shopify, if I go back over to the store, Shopify has a upload theme button, right? And this theme has to be upload a .zip file. And so what I've done is I've added a zip task. If we go back into package.json and we scroll down here, you can see all the scripts you can run, and zip is one of them. So let's run that. Yarn zip. That's gonna run pretty quickly there. It tells you how many bytes that it archived. And if I come back into here, click choose file, I go into band basic, you see that I have this workshop basic theme zip, which is the zip file that we just created. So I'm gonna open that. I'm gonna upload it. Again, it's very small right now, so this should happen quickly. And it's done. So we've got just added. I'm gonna rename this to BB production. I'm actually just gonna call it production. Rename. And we're good to go. Now, I mentioned earlier that this is a blank theme, so we're gonna see, if I go to it, it's gonna be blank white page, right? But if I inspect, I go to the console, I'll see that example code that I put. This is an example to show the use of import export syntax. And if we go back, actually gonna close out this terminal because I don't need it. And if we go back to source and scripts and theme.js, we're importing example and running example function. And if we look at components, we've got this function that runs this console.log that says the exact same thing. So we know that it's working properly. A better way to see that is to go in a customize, or not customize, but go in edit code, so we can look at the code that was uploaded and see that we've got everything that's been added. And a good one to look at is theme.js. It's not minified. You can add minify if you want, or add some minifying if you would like to, but at the moment we don't have that. And you can see that console statement is here. We're going to want to actually connect our theme. So we've uploaded a theme here, but it's not connected to our workflow, right? We want this theme to be connected to our workflow so that when we make changes, they automatically get added here. So there are a few things that we need to do. One, we need the theme ID. And since we're already on this page, if we come up here, we can see the theme ID right there. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to close out of here. I'm going to go back into setup.config, right? But setup.config.yaml is not where you add this information. This is an example file, and what you actually need is config.yaml. My preference is to copy the folder, so we do cp setup and then config.yaml. And you see that one is actually ignored. And the reason this one is ignored is because there is the one thing that's important in here that's secret is your API password. And we're going to get to that in a minute, but we're going to start out. I'm going to add the theme ID, which I just copied. We're going to do the store name. So it's called Ben, basic with a dash. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab it from here without the period. Replace that. And then we need our API password. So I'm gonna show you how to do this. And once I've showed you how to do it, right? So you click apps and then you're gonna click manage private apps. Now something to remember is I'm gonna delete this API key. I'm gonna delete both of these, and I'm gonna create new ones after this video. But for purposes of just showing you how this all works, we're gonna go through it. So you're gonna create a new private theme or a new private app. You can call it whatever you want. So we'll call it BB erase, right? Because we're gonna erase this, and we're gonna use my email. So sam@samtheweb.com, and we open this up, and we really don't need access to anything except for, scroll down to it, it should be themes. So we need read and write access to themes, and that's it. So we click save, create. And what we're gonna have here is the API key and the API password. Now, I'm gonna show the API password because, again, I'm gonna be deleting this, but if I copy that, and you don't have to, I'm just showing it, but you can keep it hidden and click copy, and it'll copy it to your clipboard. Go back here, you paste that in there, save. And once you've saved, you're gonna wanna go into, we're gonna wanna make a change, right? So we're gonna go into styles, and we're gonna go into components, example, the SCSS, and we're gonna change the background color. Now, if you remember, the background color was white before, so we're gonna do that. We're gonna run yarn build. You don't have to run this, you're not gonna have to run this every time. We've got a yarn start, which will start a watcher, and you'll be able to make changes consistently, and it'll automatically upload them. But for now, we'll do yarn build, and that's done. So now we can run yarn deploy, and that's also going to run a build, and it deploys it. And we should, if I hit refresh, should have a black background. And we do. And so that is how, that's how you get the workflow can actually connected to your theme. And in the next video, I'm gonna go over how you make a hero element on the home page. So we're gonna start actually building. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you next time.